Hello, Touchstoners. Welcome to week number 2. I'm going to give you a brief lecture that helps further explain the practical theology method. You were introduced to it last week, and this week you'll be doing your first case study that uses the method. It's oftentimes difficult for people to understand it, but once you get used to thinking in this way, it'll become very intuitive. So let me start with this diagram. This is a diagram is something that we've worked up based on Mark Lau Branson's approach to practical theology method that seems to work really well. So here's the way I want you to think about this, and I'm going to try to diagram this for you as you go. Think about yourself as walking through life, having to make a decision. You get to a moment where you need to make a critical decision, and you want to ask the question, so what's the next faithful step? How do I go from here to here? Well, what practical theology says is that at that moment, the most important thing you can do if you're trying to make a decision that is God-honoring and a faithful representation of your theological frame being lived out in the world is to actually go through a process of reflection. So think in terms of action and reflection. We use the term praxis, which is just simply a way of talking about reflective practice, the reflecting upon the way in which we act, so that it is not unconscious or in some way. So think of it this way: we have identified 5 steps. They're not linear, though they are in the numerical order. Notice the different extra arrows here that remind you that you can go in different directions. But I want you to think in terms of that before you make a decision, you're going to take 2 laps around this circle, okay? And I'm going to take you through these 1 through 5, and then you can try it for your own method. And the 5 numbers are also aligned with the 5 questions over here. So basically, you ask the question. The first thing you ask when you're trying to discern what to do is what is being done already. Now, if you're doing a case study, say like Michael Wynn that we're about today, you ask that question about him. What is Michael already doing that is enacting his beliefs right now? So as you listen deeply in the case study, or you listen deeply to a person in your congregation, or a person who's come to you for counsel, or you think about a decision you're going to make, the first thing you want to try to listen to is what is the underlying beliefs. So we sometimes talk about this 3 ways. The current praxis needs to be evaluated in terms of 3 things. What are the presenting issues? What are the deeper issues? And what are the theological issues? So think about this for a moment. The presenting issue is that Michael Wynn has some dissatisfaction with his job. Well, what are the deeper issues? What are the issues about his emotional life, his personal life, his disappointments, his feelings? And then what are the theological? So when you're analyzing your current praxis, think in terms of analyzing it in a 3-fold way: presenting issues, deeper issues, theological issues. The more reflection you do on your current practice, the better the rest of the process goes. Okay, so after you've analyzed your current praxis, this is how I am embodying my beliefs at this moment. This is where I am right here at this moment. The more you've reflected upon that, now you can bring some other things into play. Context and culture. What ways has your background, culture, or life experiences shaped you? What is it about your theological background, your church background, your cultural background, your racial background, gender, the experiences that you've had, the places where you've grown up, the culture in which you have found yourself shaped? Naming those so that you can begin to navigate those are really important. Then, after going from number 2, then look at number 3. What Christian scripture texts or practices or traditions shape you? What are the key biblical verses that have led you to your current practice? Remember, this is all in your current practice. What are the primary pieces? So let's say you come out of a background that is committed to nonviolence and you're trying to make some decisions about how you're going to vote in a presidential election. Well, what scripture texts, what practices or traditions have shaped you to this point? Naming those, putting those on the table. So, current praxis, context and culture, Christian texts and practices, And then the fourth one, which is really often overlooked and really important, is narratives. What stories or narratives have shaped you? In which ways are you impacted by, as Jamie Smith says, as another Smith who writes, that help you, the narratives that drive your lives, the narratives that sometimes haunt us, the narratives that shape us and also can sometimes hold us. A story I often tell is that when I'm thinking about my vocation, I often think in terms of what I can accomplish and what I can get done. And one of the reasons for that is that my grandmother used to famously say to all of us as kids growing up that there was really only two kinds of men in the world. There were alcoholics and workaholics. And if she liked a person, they were workaholic. And if she didn't like him, they were alcoholics. Well, I didn't want to be an alcoholic, so guess what I often act like? A workaholic. So when I'm trying to make a decision about a faithful next step in my vocation, I have to be careful to name that there's a story that has shaped me. And so then, after some stories, then we move toward experiments. And number 5 says, when you're going to take your next faithful step, you're going to think of it like an experiment that needs to be analyzed again. So again, I would encourage you to go back to Michael Wynn as you're looking at this case study, as you're looking at, and you analyze him in these 5 ways. And then also go back one more time through the story and think about the way in which you, listening to the story, your beliefs, your actions, your context, your culture, your texts, your practices, your stories, and the decisions you've made. And when you begin to give an answer, some kind of suggestion, some kind of pastoral guidance or counseling, you should be bringing together his story and your story and the biblical story to make a shared story of future hope, a next faithful step. Give this a try, see how this works. Feel free to rerun the tape a couple of times if you get it, and we're going to go over this a lot in week 4. But this is your introduction. And if you remember, if you need some time, ping me, and we can grab some time either in the conference room or through email, and I'll try to be available to you. Thanks very much.